Go. It is officially 6:30, and I want to first of all welcome everyone who was able to come out tonight and brave a rainy night in Washington. Not too rainy, but just kind of drizzly out. And those of you who I know are watching online tonight, I want to welcome you to our weekend seminar, Untangling Our Relationships with Dr. Bryan Cafferky. I will let him introduce himself in some ways as far as telling you about himself. To be honest, we've met tonight for the first time in person, though I had attended a Zoom meeting back during COVID when he was invited by the conference to share with all the pastors in the conference during that time some mental health information. And I was also witnessing a seminar when he did one at Nampa, Idaho church, and that impressed me to say, I'd love to have him come to my church. And I think that it speaks well. I have other pastors who are thinking of having him come to their church too. And so he might be a busy boy in the Washington conference, so he does have a day job, and he'll tell you about that. I'll let him describe his own day job. So without too much further ado, and to let him get our program started near time or on time, I would like us all to just bow our heads for prayer and ask God to grace our evening tonight and our weekend together. Father in heaven, we're just so thankful for the privilege of stopping. And we pray, Father, that we will be embraced by your presence on this Sabbath day, this Sabbath evening, and that you'll speak to our hearts, things that you know about, that we need to know about, that you'll bless Dr. Cafferky with your Spirit as he shares information that he has learned, and that this will help give keys to unlock some things in our lives that will be a blessing for us to let you come in to those very important places. So just pray that you'll bless and send your Spirit this evening and throughout this weekend. Thank you for being our God. Thank you for giving us your love, giving us life, giving us hope. And just want to pray now that you'll bless Dr. Cafferky and our presence with you. In Jesus' name, we give you all thanks. Amen. Without further ado, Bryan, I'll turn over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, John. I've been looking forward to this for several months, and I am thrilled to be here for a couple reasons. One, you have fresh air here. Two, you have big green trees. Three, this is one of my favorite things to talk about. There's nowhere else in the world I'd want to be. I mean, I'd like to say goodnight to my two daughters. I have a 3- to 6-year-old. But other than that, I want to be here. So I'm thrilled because this is my favorite thing to talk about. Tonight we're going to be talking about Abraham's family, and we're going to be going through most of the book of Genesis, looking at Abraham's family specifically. So we're going to be kind of rushing through his family to try and learn some things about the family, and hopefully you're going to be learning some things about yourself, and maybe some things about the story of Abraham that maybe you have not been exposed to before, thought about before. So we'll be here tonight. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. we'll be here, and then the church service at 11, and then again at 1:30. So please don't miss those. I know some of you might be watching online. Welcome as well. So if you can come online and be in person, go back to online, whatever you want to do, however you want to participate, that's up to you. All right, this image right here, this is the Mesopotamian depiction of the tree of life. Abraham would have seen this, and he would have known that this was the tree of life. So we are going to try and reach back millennia to connect with Abraham and his family. And if you see these little flowerets right here, I tried to connect some of these flowerets to the symbol for you for untangling our relationships, because we're really trying to reach back in time and notice family patterns that Abraham experienced in his family, and hopefully have a little insight into some family patterns that we might experience in our own families as well. And I'm guessing as we go through this evening, you'll start to see some parallels. So we'll be going through this intergenerational journey, looking at Abraham's family. But first, I want to socially locate myself. Now, some people may not be that interested in social location, but there are certain generations and certain people who are interested in learning about people's social location. So that's why I'm sharing that today. So I am 42 years old. I'm a heterosexual, cisgender male. I'm white. I'm a 4th generation SDA. I'm fairly physically able. I can move up and down stairs. I can carry things. I wear glasses if I'm in front of the screen for too much, but I do not need glasses when I'm driving or reading. I've been married since 2009. Functional specialty, I teach family therapy at Loma Linda University. I've been teaching at Loma Linda University since 2015. Before that, I was a pastor here in Washington Conference at Green Lake Church. Then I went to seminary. Then I went to marriage and family therapy. Then a PhD in marriage and family therapy. And then I'm back at Loma Linda, and I love what I'm doing. No military experience. I'm associate faculty member in the Counseling Family Sciences at Loma Linda University. I was born here in the United States. I'm SDA. I'm an abstract sequential thinker. I also do improvisational theater. I've been doing improvisational theater for 20 years. We might do a little bit of that. Well, depending on the time, we'll see what happens tomorrow. I might bring some of that in. So I live in Southern California. There are 3 fires within about 20-minute drive from my house right now. So it's smoky, hazy. The air is very different from here. I love September in the Pacific Northwest. A little bit cooler, a little bit of rain, a little bit of sunshine. Oh, I love it. So please enjoy this. I'm enjoying it. Please enjoy it after I leave. I have 2 children, 3 and 6-year-old, both through IVF, and both rainbow babies, meaning that my wife and I had some losses before we had these 2 children. Education, I have a PhD in marriage and family therapy. I'm a non-smoker. Work background, I've been a camp counselor. I've been a student missionary. I've been a pastor. I've done improvisational theater, and now I'm teaching. I also practice marriage and family therapy 1 day a week. I present at different conferences, and I do research. Middle-class American. That's kind of my social location. Again, some of you may not be that interested in this. There might be other people who are participating that are interested in this information. All right, so we're going to be focusing on Abraham's family dynamics, so strap in. Now, normally when we think about the story of Abraham, we are looking at the interaction between God and humanity, right? Between the Creator God, Yahweh, the God who creates covenants with people. So there's a lot of theological focus and reflection. Tonight, I invite you to temporarily suspend some of that theological reflection so that we can look at the family, and I promise you at the end of tonight, we'll come back and do some theological reflection. We really want to look at the family, trying to view what's happening with that family. When it comes to family therapy, this is sort of my experience. If you've never been a family therapist, what happens is you go through school and you often watch therapy happening behind a one-way mirror. So the people inside the room, similar to these mirrors over here, maybe the child's over here, where maybe the people on the inside can see us, but we can't see them very well. The same sort of thing happens when we are training for family therapy. We have a group of people watching. We have a supervisor behind the window. There's a little camera here on the left. And inside, we have the student clinicians and the family or the individual or the couple, and we're watching behind a one-way mirror, and we're talking about what's happening. We cannot directly intervene on the family because we are behind the mirror, but we can watch what's happening. In a very similar manner, when we read the Genesis narrative of Abraham, we're observing through a one-way mirror of time. We can't go in to interact with them, but we can watch them, right? So this is what we're doing tonight. I invite you to watch this family through a one-way mirror of time. And we'll be focusing on cycles and patterns. And I'm hoping, if I do my job well, you'll see clear patterns that are passed down from generation to generation to generation, and you'll have a better understanding of how these people are interacting with one another. If trauma can be inherited from one generation to the next, then so can love, emotional intelligence, and wisdom. Tonight we'll be focusing more on some of the challenges that Abraham's family faced. So some of the anxiety, how they resolve conflict, some of the difficulty, some of the dysfunction, you could say. Even though there are lots of other moments, glimmering moments that we're not going to be focusing on tonight, I do want to just give a nod to this, noticing there are awesome things that are passed down from generation to generation to Abraham's family. But tonight we'll be looking at some more of the tricky components. As a family therapist, this is something I firmly believe in, that every behavior is a symptom of the system. All of our behavior, or at least 99% of it, I believe, is pattern behavior. We learned it somewhere, and we practiced it. Sometimes we're really good at it. Maybe some things we don't want to be really good at, we're good at. And every behavior is a symptom of the system. And if we can understand the system and understand the symptom and understand the behavior all in that context, a lot of the things we witness will make a lot more sense. If you don't see the system, you don't understand the family rules and why someone's behaving in this manner, their behavior might seem odd or different. But if you understand the full system, you can understand the role they play in that family. This says Genetics for Dummies. So we have 2 gummy bears who have 2 children, and it's half and half. And this gummy bear partners with this gummy bear, and they have 3 children. And this gummy bear partners with this gummy bear. So we can see genetically how these people are related, correct? This is a little gummy bear family tree. I'm going to show you something called a genogram. It's very similar to a family tree, but I am not primarily interested in genetic relationships. Instead, I'm interested on how people are relating to one another. So the first thing we're going to do tonight is learn how to read the symbols on a genogram. Okay? So welcome to class. Here we go. This is a genogram. I'm going to walk you through this, and then we'll have a roving microphone to see if we can understand this. Dahlia, right here, this is the individual who created this genogram. This is her perspective of what's happening. We're going to get to this, but not yet. So Dahlia created this genogram. We're going to start at the top left. Notice this is a square. This person is Thornton. Males are squares. Females are circles. So Thornton, there's an X through Thornton. So Thornton has passed away at the time this genogram was created. Thornton has passed away. Becca is still alive. And they had 3 children. The eldest is on the left. The youngest is on the right. So we're going to go chronologically in that family. Tyson is still alive. James, the middle child, has passed away. And then Christy is the youngest daughter. Are we on board so far? Yeah? Okay. So James partnered with Roxy, and Roxy is the only child of Gladys who's passed away, and we do not know who the biological father is in this family. There's this double hash mark. This shows that there's been a divorce between Gladys and this individual. We know that James and Roxy partnered. Now again, there might be some symbols on here that are not represented in your own family, but it's important for me to show you these symbols so that if you ever see a genogram out in the wild, you'll know what these different symbols are. So James and Roxy had 2 offspring. Jeff is the eldest son. Trisha is the youngest daughter. Jeff partnered with Sophia, and Sophia and Jeff had 2 children, Dahlia and Philip. How are we doing? Doing okay? Okay, great. Trisha, see this little triangle here? That means Trisha identifies as lesbian, and she has a partner here, Hannah, and they have a daughter, Julie. Over on the right-hand side, Ricky and Catalina. Ricky has passed away at the time this genogram was created. See these 2 individuals coming from the same spot? That means these 2 people are twins. This is going to be important because there are some twins in Genesis. We got to make sure to include this here. At the time this genogram was created, Martin had passed away. Roberto is still alive. Roberto has partnered with Karina, and they have 3 children, Sophia, Emily, and Damien. Notice how there's this square here and the circle around it. This is how you show someone who is transgender. So born male, but transitioned to female. Again, not every family has an individual identifies this way, but if you have someone in your family like this, it would be important to at least understand what the symbols are. And then Damien and Lily, double hash mark, so there's a divorce here, and they had 1 child, Berenice. I think that's everybody in this family. Any questions about this? If you have a question, raise your hand. Here's a sweet opportunity to do a little bit of learning. No hands? So either I explain this really well or really poorly. One of those 2. Okay. Everybody take a deep breath more for me. Oh yes, there's a hand back there. Will you please take the microphone back there?
On Karina on the right.
Karina on the right. This one?
Does that mean that she's deceased?
Yes, she has also passed away. Thank you. Good. You're right. Most of the X's are Thornton, James, Ricky, Martin, but Gladys and Karina, they've both passed away. Thank you. If I was going to make this genogram, I would include dates as well, like when they were born, when they passed away. Oh, more hands. I love this. Thank you for starting the cascade of questions. All right, we have some more questions over here.
I'll go first.
Okay.
So this is a real family diagram.
Oh, good question. This is a composite diagram of individuals that I've seen in therapy. Names have been changed, families have been restructured, but I'm pulling elements from people that I've seen in therapy. This is not right here, this is not one full family. Does that make sense? We could say it's fictional, but it's educational, used for educational purposes. Yes? Adopted, okay, great.
I think she was next.
Is Julie
Julie.
adopted?
Julie, where's Julie?
The lesbian couple.
Trish, oh, I don't know. It doesn't say. We don't know. Not enough information here. Sometimes we have partial information. We don't know where people, that's a good question. Could have been surrogate, could have adopted, I'm not sure. Don't know that information. There is a way to show adoption, and you'll see that potentially during the rest of our presentation. There's a hand over here.
So where the twins are at?
Yep.
The lines come from the same point, right?
Yep.
That means they're twins. What about the two dots underneath? Same
Fraternal
thing?
fraternal twins.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Good. Okay. We're gonna move on. Okay, everybody take a deep breath. Here we go. This is where it gets fun. So look at the bottom left. I'll go over the legend first, then I'll try and apply these different interaction lines. And this is why I, as a family therapist, love a genogram. Because the genogram shows how people are or are not getting along. All right? Okay, so on the bottom left, this little legend, parallel green lines means a close relationship. This would be a healthy, close relationship. Two people are close to one another. 3 parallel red lines means a fused relationship. You might use the word enmeshed. They are really close in an unhealthy way. It's not good for people. We might know some people like that in our families or extended families. I don't know. This jagged red line means there's conflict between people. The jagged blue line with an arrow shows there's some sort of abuse, and the arrow indicates who the victim of the abuse is, and the beginning of the arrow is the perpetrator of the abuse. There are ways to show different forms of abuse. I did not include that here. Then we have this dotted gray line, which shows emotional distance. Means we get along, but there's some distance between us. And the dotted red line with red hash marks means emotional cutoff. Meaning, if you invite me and my cousin to Thanksgiving dinner and I find out my cousin is going, I probably will not attend. Or I will come, but I'll sit on the opposite side of the table, and there will be no conversation, because we are emotionally cut off from one another. All right, let's try and apply this. Top left, we have Becca, who is cut off from her husband, Thornton, cut off from her eldest son, Tyson, cut off from James, but enmeshed, has a fused relationship with her daughter, Christy. We see Gladys was the perpetrator of abuse towards her only daughter, Roxy. We see Roxy as a source of a lot of drama in this family. She perpetrates abuse towards her cousin, her sister-in-law, because she's partnered with James, so towards her sister-in-law, towards both of her children. There's also conflict with her daughter's partner and lots of other people on this side of the family. So a lot of people might point to Roxy and say, she's a source of a lot of stress. I don't know if we want Roxy to come over. It's really easy to point our finger at someone, but every behavior is a symptom of the system. And we're going to think about why some of these might be in place. On the top right, we have Ricky and Catalina. They have a really close relationship. Roberto and Martine have a close relationship. We see that Roberto and Jeff, so Roberto and his son-in-law, have a close relationship. We see Jeff and Philip have a close relationship. There's a close relationship with Sophia and Dahlia. There's some tension between Sophia and Roxy. Well, Roxy has tension with lots of people. Sophia has tension with her now transgender middle sister, and there's tension between Emily and Damien. There's cutoff between Damien and Lily, cutoff between Karina and Lily. It looks like both these parents, Roberto has a favorite offspring, Karina has a favorite offspring, Sophia is not included in those favorite offsprings. There's some emotional distance between her and her father. You might notice that there are not all of these lines going to everybody. This is because Dahlia created this genogram, and she put the relational lines between people that she thought were the most prominent or the most important for us to understand. Obviously, Jeff has a relationship with other people, with Trisha, but there's no direct relational line between Jeff and Trisha right now. There's no relational line between Trisha and Julie. There's no relational line between Dahlia and Julie. It doesn't mean they don't interact. It just means in this genogram, whoever created Dahlia, she thought these were the most important relational interactions. So there is a subjectivity when it comes to creating a genogram, right? How I think people get along. If Philip made this genogram, it might look different. If Jeff made this genogram, it might look slightly different. So if you have 10 people in a family, everybody's genogram might be a little bit different. Just like if there are 3 children who grow up in a family, those 3 children grow up in different families because they experience that family differently. All right. Raise your hand. Any questions about trying to understand this? Any lines that you're like, I don't know what this means. I'm not sure how this makes sense in this genogram. Yes, there's a hand back here.
Yes, I'm looking at Jeff and Trisha. I mean, they're both children of
James and
James
Roxy.
and Roxy. But why are they at different levels, so to
Good
speak?
question. I love this. Good question. So Dahlia created this genogram, and usually whoever creates the genogram, they want to put them at the bottom. There comes a time where realistically we want everyone on the same general strata across. But if we brought Trisha all the way down here where Jeff is, and we had Trisha with Hannah and Julie sticking down here, the person who's reading this genogram might get confused and think that Julie was potentially an offspring of Jeff and Sophia. So we're trying to just offset them just a little bit. It doesn't mean that one is more important than the other. It just means we tried to make space for Dahlia's family. Ideally, in a perfect world, Trisha would be the eldest offspring over here, and Jeff would be over on this side, so that Trisha and Hannah were on the left side, and there would be nobody in the middle of Jeff and Sophia. But that's not how families work. They are born where they are born. Yes?
What did you say was a fused relationship?
They're enmeshed. They're really close. When one person gets anxious or upset, the other person automatically gets anxious and upset. They share a close emotional field. They're in each other's business. When one person's angry, the other person's automatically angry. It's a storm of emotional interactions. Yes?
So the last thing you mentioned in the talk was if you have a family of 3 kids, they all came from different families?
Okay. Do you have any siblings?
I do, 4.
4, okay.
I mean, there's 4 of us.
Okay, 4. I'm guessing you and the other 3 siblings all grew up in the same house,
Yes.
but you experienced the family differently.
Okay.
We have our own perspective of what was happening in the family. So because of that, we have different stories about what happened in that family. So it's like we grew up in 4 different families. Obviously, there are some shared facts that are the same, but we might remember stories differently. We might have interpreted stories differently. We might remember some events, but have forgotten other events. So every person grows up with their own unique perspective of that family, even if we have the same biological parents or live in the same casita or the same tent. Wherever we are, we have a different experience of that same family. Yes, hand in the background. Can we get a microphone back there, please?
Thank you. My family is a prime example of that. I have a sister 3.5 years younger, and then when I was 14, my parents adopted 2 younger children. And the way we see our childhoods is very different, and in actuality, it was very different.
Yes, yes. Thank you. Good. So if I was working with a family and I helped them create this genogram, I'd start to ask questions about, why is this happening this way? What's going on here? So I'm going to give you a few of my own musings, and I'm going to hand the microphone over to you, and we're going to kind of brainstorm possibilities for why these relational lines are this way. So I look over here, and I look at Roxy, and I think, wow, she's an only child, and we don't know who her biological father is. There's a divorce between her and her mother and biological father. She was the victim of abuse. Maybe she has difficulty feeling safe in relationships. If you've ever been at a cabin or someone's house where it's cold outside during the wintertime, but there's a hot jacuzzi, there's a big difference in temperature between the air and the hot water, right? And when you put your hand or your foot in the water, it might feel kind of spicy because of the big temperature difference. If one person is used to more space and emotional distance, being really close with other people might feel spicy. And that person might want to push other people away because they feel more comfortable. That's familiar to them. So there's a chance that Roxy was just pulling from the playbook that was handed to her in her family of origin. How do I interact with people? I push them away, I attack them to keep them at arm's length to make sure that they don't hurt me. I hurt other people before they hurt me. So a lot of people blame Roxy for all of her bad behavior, but every behavior is a symptom of the system. So maybe this is her only playbook that she has. So she's operating the best that she can. And everybody points fingers at her. In fact, it's kind of nice to blame everything on Roxy, because then everybody else can ignore their own responsibility in those relationships, right? It's sweet to have a scapegoat, because I don't have to worry about my own behavior, right? So in some ways, Roxy serves a very important purpose in the family. We can blame all the stress on her instead of carrying our own weight. I look here, I see that Jeff is distant from his biological father. Do we see that? And Sophia is distant from her biological father. Do you see that? But we see that there's a close connection between Roberto and Jeff. And maybe Jeff is thinking, you know what? I was distant from my biological father. If I ever have a son, I'm going to make sure he knows that he's important. So when the second child comes along, wow, Jeff gravitates towards Philip. Sophia, she grew up in a family, I mean, some chills, some tingles, goosebumps, even though it's a fictional family, because this still happens in families. Sophia grew up in a family where Emily and Damien were both favorite children of her two parents, but not her. There's distance between her and her biological father. Maybe Sophia thought, if I ever have a daughter, I'm going to make sure that my daughter knows that she is important and cared for and loved. So when Dahlia came along, Sophia focused on Dahlia. So there's a favorite child over here. Jeff has a favorite child over here. So there are some crisscrossing, close connections with the offspring that matches your gender. All right. What else do you see here you might be curious about?
Wait a second. Is there a relationship between Jeff and Sophia?
Yes. Ooh, there's some distance. There's some emotional distance there.
Are they siblings?
Jeff and Sophia are partners. They're romantic partners. They're married. Yep. It looks like it goes through Julie, see? But Julie's supposed to be up just a little bit more. Jeff and Sophia, they are married, but there's some emotional distance between them. Maybe they experience their closeness, not with each other, but with their children. But notice these children, there's some conflict between them. See that? Perhaps this parallels the emotional distance between their parents. Yes, there's a hand over here, microphone.
So looking at Karina,
Where?
well, let's start with,
Here.
I think it was, Lily, right? Lily is cut off
Yep.
from Damien.
You're
right?
cut off from Damien and
that
from
could be a result of her being cut off from her mom.
Lily is cut off from her mother-in-law.
Mother-in-law, yeah, okay.
Maybe, if in the hypothetical scenario, Damien came to talk to his mother and said, Lily's a bad person.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
And Karina says, well, I believe my son. So I also agree you're a bad person. So maybe that's why they cut off Lily. We don't know in this situation if Lily cut them off or if they cut Lily off. Or maybe it was mutual. We don't know. Yes?
Is Dahlia a square with a circle in it?
Good. So this is a female Dahlia, but we put a larger square around it just to identify for the world who created the genogram.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Good question. Good. How are we feeling about reading this? Give me a double thumbs up if you feel really good. One thumbs up if you're like, I kind of get it. Give me a thumbs down if you want me to spend more time. My head hurts. Okay. We got a few more minutes together. But if we can hold on to this information, this is going to help us as we track the family patterns in Abraham's family, because we're going to use a genogram to do this. Okay? Raise your hand if you learned something new already. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. What's cool is, if you're interested, you can create your own genogram. You go on YouTube and learn how to do it. There are some programs you can do, you can purchase or borrow, or you can just make it in some Microsoft Office, in that suite. You can make some of these. You can go online and learn how to do this. So if you are interested in learning about how to create your own genogram and tracking family patterns, you can definitely do that. All right, tonight I'm going to talk about stress and anxiety interchangeably. There are some differences between them, but stress and anxiety manifest themselves almost in the exact same way physiologically in our bodies. So I'll be using them interchangeably, even though there is an important difference between them, which I'll point out, but I just want us to be on the same page. We'll be talking about stress and anxiety as if they're the same thing. Here's the difference. When I'm stressed, I know exactly what I'm stressed about. It's April 14, and I'm stressed because I have to do my taxes. I'm stressed about that. I'm stressed about a birthday party coming up because I haven't planned it yet. I know exactly why I'm stressed. When I'm anxious, it's hard for me to put my finger on why I'm feeling this anxiety. So that's the big difference between if I'm stressed, I can name what it is. If I'm anxious, it's a little bit more difficult to do so. But when I'm stressed or anxious, both those experiences manifest themselves very similarly in my body. So we pass on stress and anxiety in our relationships, and we often manage stress and anxiety in a very similar manner. And how we cope with anxiety, we often teach our offspring how to cope in a very similar manner. And so these playbooks about how to handle tension between other people or stress and anxiety, these special playbooks are passed down like a precious family heirloom to the next generation, the next generation. So we learned in our own family how to resolve conflict or not, or how to avoid it, or how to get aggressive. We learned how to cope. We learned all these things in our family of origin, and we carry those same dance steps to our future relationships. Every behavior is a symptom of the system. If we can understand the system, we can understand why these behaviors are in place. So the focus evening, these are some questions we'll be thinking about as we go through this. What are some of Abraham's family rules? What are the rules of this family? What are the intergenerational patterns of behavior? That's just a fancy word, monkey see, monkey do. What are the patterns that are in one generation that are passed down to the next generation, That's what we're looking for. How do people in this family handle anxiety and tension? How do they experience prejudice and discrimination? Who are the villains? Who are the heroes? It's really easy to point at Roxy. Oh, she's a bad villain. Is she? We'll explore this in this family. And our first question for the audience, now we've gone past the genogram, does anyone know in what chapter the story of Abram begins? 10? 12? It's right between those in 11. Double ones. So we got the bookends. That's good. A lot of people start on chapter 12, the call of God towards Abraham, but there's some important piece of information that we need to know first. We need to listen to the narrator of the story, and we want to pay attention to what shows up first and how we are introduced to our main characters. Abraham's story starts in Genesis 11, and here's what we first learn about this family. Sarai was barren. She had no child. The narrator wants us to know this is how the story begins. So before we learn that Sarah is beautiful, we learn that she is barren. Before we learn that she is Abram's half-sister, we learn that she can't have children. This is how the story of this family starts. So let's start there at this baseline, because this is the story of Abram and Sarai's fertility and infertility. This is followed all the way through their story. Here in the United States, there are several dates that are important for individuals who have challenges with infertility or have had losses. So we have National Infertility Awareness Week, we have Mother's Day, we have Father's Day, August 22, and October 15. We are right here, obviously, in September, so we're sandwiched between National Rainbow Baby Day and National Pregnancy Infant Loss Remembrance Day, and then the holidays are also difficult for individuals who have difficulty with infertility. For those of you who don't know, infertility is a disease or condition of the reproductive system, often diagnosed after a couple has had 1 year of unprotected, well-timed intercourse, or if the woman has suffered from multiple miscarriages and the woman is under 35 years of age. If the woman is over 35 years old, it is diagnosed after 6 months of unprotected, well-timed intercourse. Currently, 1 in 8 couples have trouble getting pregnant or sustaining pregnancy. 1 in 4 women will experience a miscarriage in their lifetime, and the word miscarriage never shows up in the story of Genesis. But it would not surprise me if this was part of their infertility journey. There's some words that just don't show up there because Hebrew is a very concise and parsimonious language, and there's decades of material in just a few chapters, right? Some stuff are left out. But the infertility is how the story starts. There's barrenness in the ancient Near East on the left-hand side. This is open stigma community. This is a community issue. Women are not allowed to inherit their own land, so they have to rely on the men to do this. It's important to have children to secure their own survival. It's always the woman's fault when there's barrenness, always. If you're infertile, try surrogacy. If you want 5 children, plan for 10. And it's painful and traumatic. In the Western world, it's also an isolating stigma. It's more of a private issue than a community issue. Women can inherit and own land. Having children is more of a personal preference, it's more optional, whereas before, it was not an optional piece. It can be either a female problem, a male problem, or both, or unexplained infertility. Doctors may not understand why they're experiencing infertility. We don't always get to point the finger at someone as if it's their fault, as if they chose this to happen. If you're infertile, try IUI or IVF. If you want children, ask science to help you. Both of our daughters were, it's like crazy science fiction, they were both frozen as embryos and then later transferred. So it's amazing to me that they were frozen, they were thawed out, and they were transferred. That's amazing to me. And you can decide how many embryos you want to transfer. You can do that with science. It's amazing. But infertility and barrenness is still painful and traumatic for people here in the Western world. All right, here's how people normally start the story of Abraham. The call of God. And I want you to focus on two big themes. I tried to underline them. One of them is in italics. So you can see the themes that God is using to pull on Abram and Sarai. Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. And so you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse. And in you all of the families of the earth will be blessed. Two main things: family and land. Do we see that? Family and land all the way through. God is talking to them about family and land. This is important because this is in Genesis 12. God has already talked with humanity about family and land previously. In Genesis, after Adam and Eve ate of the fruit of the tree and God kicked them out of the garden, God talked with Adam and Eve, and he said to Adam, he said, "Cursed is the ground because of you," notice the land, the ground because of you, "in pain you shall eat of it, all it is of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return." When I was younger, I used to see this as God saying, you're going to get blisters on your hand and sore back, work in the ground. I'm not so sure if that's what he's talking about. He's talking about thistles and thorns and how it's going to be hard. This is what's going to bring forth for you thorns and thistles. You shall eat the plants of the field by the sweat of your face. So he's talking about all this, but in pain you shall eat of it. So if you work hard and you're able to produce food and crops to eat, at least you have something to eat, right? But the real pain of trying to work the ground is when you work the soil and it does not produce food, right? Then there's the pain of famine, not having enough food. And this is something that is experienced in the story of Abraham. So I think God is talking about the pain of doing all this hard work and the earth is not producing food. He also talks to Eve. He says to the woman, he said, "I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children, yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you." Now I have to try and thread the needle on this. I will probably never give birth to children. But I do not want to be standing up here as a man and mansplain to you what it's like to give birth, right? So please understand what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. So I've never given birth. My wife has, and we have other friends who have, and they talk about the pain, and now we have epidurals that if you're able to receive in such a time that can greatly help with the physical pain, but sometimes doesn't always get there in time. But I don't think that God is talking about epidurals here. I think God is talking about the pain of wanting to have children and not being able to have those children. Because before sin entered the world, death was not a part of this, right? I think God is talking about the emotional pain, emotional trauma of trying to have children and not being able to. So we have Mother Earth that is not producing and mothers who are not producing. Infertility and famine, these are the two big drivers in the story of Abraham. Every single generation wrestles with these two things. All four generations in Abraham's story. How are we going to handle famine? How are we going to handle infertility? Obviously, there's some other things, but these are the main drivers in that family. Oh, look at this, a genogram. Hey, we know this. So in the story, we have Abram who has partnered with his half-sister Sarai and his brother Nahor who partners with his brother's daughter Milcah. Now, in this time, it's normal to partner with other people in your tribe. So I'm going to move these individuals, Milcah and Sarah, over a little bit so they can fit to our little genogram symbols that we're used to. Use the males on the left, females on the right. But we can see how Milcah is the daughter here and Sarah is the daughter here. Are we on board with this so far? Hopefully you're able to track this. We know some people have passed away at the time of this recounting of the story. So we have Terah, Abram, Sarai, and Lot. Here's a map. If you didn't know what this was, this is a map. On the right-hand side, this is Ur. This is one of the major Sumerian Mesopotamian cities. If you know the word urban, it comes from Ur. Who likes responding to emails in their inbox? Nobody? Well, you can blame the Mesopotamians because they were the first people who created cuneiform writing. So they are the originators of all the emails you have to wade through. You can blame them. Have you ever heard of the phrase, I don't want to recreate the wheel? It's because they created the wheel. In fact, Ur was a very cosmopolitan city. They had paved roads. They had running water in some of the houses, but definitely throughout the city. Because Tigris and Euphrates were here, they developed this irrigation technique to spread the fresh water around to grow lots of crops. So they grew wheat and barley at like 5 to 10 times the rest of the area. So they had a surplus of goods to share with other people, which means they were a very wealthy city as well. There's a lot of arts in the city of Ur. And this area right up here, this is more like the Akkadian area. And this is important because there are special tablets we're going to talk about 10 minutes. Tablets from this area right here, the people in this region would have known about. Tablets that partially describe how we are supposed to get along with one another in our family. So Abraham and Sarah would have known about this. So Ur is a very cosmopolitan city, which is very different from the wild, wild west over here of Canaan, which is like the more Bedouin tent herd lifestyle. Over here, we have running water. Over here, we have to dig for wells, right? We have a surplus of food over here. Over here, we have famine. So very different lifestyles that Abram and Sarai have to navigate. So they are in Ur, and they go up here to Paddan-aram, and this is where God calls them here to the wild, wild west of Canaan. This is kind of where most of the story begins. This is more story happens in Genesis. Let's just recognize they came from a very different context. These is archaeological photos of the sewer system in Ur. They had a sewer system. Look at these big circles. They had these big pipes, little flushing areas, so they were able to take waste from inside the city, down these tubes, out, flush it out of the city, so they had running water and a sewage system. Very different from the Bedouin lifestyle, right? So when they moved over to Paddan-aram, over to Canaan, they left some of the creature comforts behind. So their story was their infertility story. Anyone know who the first son of this family was? Ishmael, okay. Anyone else? Isaac, Ishmael. What if I told you they had a son before those two? Would you believe me? The narrator wants us to see this. Let's pay attention. So Abram went forth as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. So the narrator wants us to know that Lot went with them. Now, Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife and Lot his nephew and all their possessions, set out for the land of Canaan. Later on, Genesis 12, there is a famine in the land, and Abram goes down with Sarai down to Pharaoh, and he says to his wife, will you please pretend like you're my sister? Don't tell him that we're married, right? I'm worried about my own skin. So she's taken into Pharaoh's harem. Because Abraham is worried about the prejudice and discrimination that he's going to face as an outsider. He's worried about how they're going to treat him. But after Pharaoh finds out, he sends them away with gifts. So Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, he and his wife and all that belonged to him, and Lot with him. Now Lot, who went with Abram, the narrative is spending a lot of time trying to make sure that we understand that Lot is now a part of this family. Why? Lot's father has passed away, and there's no foster care system. We are supposed to take care of our own. So the families will adopt the others. So Lot was actually the first child adopted of Abram and Sarai. So we see here Lot, who's actually, his parents are over here, but he's adopted. There's a little dotted line right here. Someone asked about the question, I think, in the previous genogram. You showed a dotted line here showing that he was adopted by these two individuals. Genesis 13, 14, and 18, we know that Abram cares a lot for Lot. Abraham lets Lot choose first where to settle. Remember, there's some conflict between the shepherds, and he says, look, there's a lot of conflict between us. Where do you want to locate? Do you want to be on the lush lands of Sodom and Gomorrah, or over here? He lets Lot choose first. Abram rescues Lot. If you remember the story, there are 4 kings from the east that are coming to force Sodom and Gomorrah to pay them tribute. And Sodom and Gomorrah say, we're not going to pay you tribute anymore. So the 4 kings and their professional armies take all of the people and head out. Abram hears about it, calls his posse of friends, chases after them to rescue Lot. He risks his own life against a professional army to try and rescue Lot. And then maybe the most audacious of all, Abraham bargains with God to save Lot's life. Abram is very interested in preserving Lot. Abram said, "O Lord God," this is Genesis 15, "O Lord God, what will you give me since I am childless?" So he's still asking for his own biological child. "And the heir of my house is Eliezer of Damascus." And Abram said, "Since you have given no offspring to me, one born in my house is my heir." Genesis 16, this is after they return up from Egypt. Sarai has this idea, hey, we're still barren. What about this idea of Hagar? Can you take Hagar and maybe through surrogacy have a child? Remember the story? Then after Hagar becomes pregnant, here's how you show someone is pregnant. Sarah is mistreating Hagar, so Hagar runs away. Now, raise your hand if you have heard the story of Sarai framed in such a way that Sarai was not faithful enough. She would have had more faith in God. Maybe she wouldn't have come up with this crazy idea to bring Hagar into their marriage and mess everything up, right? My guess is Sarah was not the first person in the world to think of this idea. In fact, it's clear in some Mesopotamian tablets, this is how you handle barrenness. So, is this out of desperateness of infertility and pursuit of the IVF of the day? Is it because she wants to pursue polygamy? Oftentimes, at least within conservative Adventist Christian circles, we've seen this, don't bring another person, polygamy is bad. And it's clear that the narrator has some hard things to say about polygamy, but for me, when I'm looking at this, I see Sarai suggesting the IVF of the day. In fact, Rebecca, which is the next generation, Rachel and Leah, which is the following generation, all of those other matriarchs had some handmaids to join them. Sarai did not. There's no mention of any handmaids until she comes up from Egypt. So it's only now that she has access to this possibility of surrogacy. We all know who the biological son of Hagar and Abraham is, right? Ishmael. And the biological son of Abraham and Sarai is Isaac. Anyone know the biological sons of Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, Zilpah? Would we confidently be able to say which biological sons are linked with which mothers? How about Naphtali? Anyone know who the biological mother of Naphtali is? Okay, we'll see. Dan? Reuben? Oh, Reuben's first. Okay, we can do that. And we could do Joseph and Benjamin there at the end with Rachel. But for most Christians, it gets a little bit muddy in the middle, right? We don't make that big of a deal who the biological mother is of the 12 tribes of Israel, but we certainly do here. Because this is the son of promise. Oh, sorry, not Lot. Ishmael is the son of promise. This is the adopted son. And then we have, as I say, Isaac is the son of promise. And Ishmael is the one that, maybe we shouldn't have done that. Let's look at these tablets, these newsy tablets, to see what they say about how we handle families. So these newsy tablets, they're about 4,000 tablets in cuneiform. This is what cuneiform looks like. And there are several tablets that talk about marriage and fertility laws. These are the expectations, what you do when it comes to families. 1, a wife can give her slave girl as surrogate to her husband to obtain offspring. So this is a rule. Hey, we experience barrenness. You can find someone as a surrogate so you can continue on the family line. They don't have IVF. They have this. So this was an expectation that people knew about this as a possibility. But if you do this, there are 2 clear stipulations. Here's the first one. The child is to be treated as her own. That's the first one. If you're going to do this, the child that comes should be treated as your own. The second one, if later they have a full biological child or biological son, the first child cannot be expelled from the family. Those are the 2 rules. Did I hear several oops? Yeah. Why did we say oops? Both these things happened, right? Right. Also, in this tablet, I just couldn't fit it on the left-hand side, the father has the right to name any of his sons as his heir, regardless of birth order. I think this is important. So, here, if we're interested, Naphtali is the son of Bilhah. Gad is the son of Zilpah. I should have said Issachar, that would be Zebulun. Maybe next time. If you come to my next seminar, I'll use these 2 down here. So this is the list of biological sons and their biological mothers. We make a big deal about it when it comes to Hagar and Sarai, but not as big of a deal when it comes to Leah, Rachel, Bilhah, and Zilpah. Hagar is running down away. She's running away from her mistreatment. She's running back to Egypt. And God meets her at well at Beersheba and says, go back home. So Hagar returns back home. And when Hagar gives birth, it is very clear in Genesis 16 that Sarai is not mentioned as being present. Sarai is trying to be very clear here. This was my idea, but this is not my child. She's not present at the birth. And I think she's prejudiced towards Hagar, who's Egyptian, and now her son is half Egyptian. So she is treating them differently. Genesis 17, finally the names have changed. I can just say Abraham and Sarah instead of Abram and Sarah. I get those confused sometimes. And there's more infertility mentioned again in Genesis 17. Genesis 18, Sarah laughs at God when God says that they will still have a biological son. Sarah thinks that's ridiculous. There's no way. Look how old, and that's not even a possibility. There's bargaining with God for Lot's life and more mention of infertility. So almost every chapter there's mention of this infertility. Why? This is a big deal for this family. A big, big deal. And sometimes we lose that when we focus on the interaction between God and Abraham, the divine and humanity. But there's lots of stuff happening in the family that's driving this. This is why Abraham is constantly brings up, God, what about this? God, don't forget about this. So even Abraham got impatient sometimes, right? We also know that Abraham is not a morning person. There are 3 times in Genesis where Abraham gets up early in the morning. We'll start with the third one. Genesis 22, this is the binding of Isaac when Abraham is getting ready to bring Isaac with the 2 servants up to Mount Moriah to sacrifice him. So Abraham rose early in the morning. I have read for the verbs. There are 6 verbs in this sentence. Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him and Isaac his son, and he split wood for the burnt offering and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Normally when the narrator of Genesis is telling a story, it's they get up, they moved, they arrived. But the narrator is slowing down the movie scene so we can see this old patriarch doing this manual labor that he did not need to do. We already mentioned some servants. We know he is a wealthy individual at this point in time, but he wants to do this himself. Why? This might be the last time he sees Isaac in camp. The second time Abraham gets up early in the morning. Genesis 21, verse 14. Ishmael would be sent to the desert. So Abraham rose early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, putting them on her shoulder, gave her the boy, and sent her away, basically to die in the desert. This might be the last time he ever sees Ishmael alive at camp. The first time Abraham gets up early in the morning, Genesis 19, after he's bargained with God. So Abraham arose early in the morning, see the same pattern, and went to the place where he had stood before the Lord, where he had talked with God to barter for Lot's and his family's life. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and he looked toward all the land of the valley, and he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land ascended like the smoke of a furnace. This might be the last time he sees his adopted son, Lot. It's very clear he is interested in the well-being of all 3 of those boys. Genesis 20, there's another famine. So Abraham and Sarah have to go up to the Philistines, to King Abimelech, and he uses the exact same lie. Oh, this is my sister, not my wife. Obviously, Abimelech learns about it, but he's worried about being treated differently, experiencing prejudice and discrimination because he's not from around that area, right? Later on, when Abimelech finds out about it, because God comes and talks with him, Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maids, so they bore children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the household of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. In fact, in this family, even fringe characters are interested in having children. This is not just an Abraham family thing. Other people are concerned about it as well, which tells us this is not just an experience that was unique to this family. Other people were also trying to navigate this. Genesis 21. At this point in time, finally Isaac arrives. Sarah is 90 years old. Abraham is 100. They had to wait 25 years from when God called them, promising them land and children. They had to wait 25 years for this full biological child to finally arrive. We know that Ishmael ends up teasing Isaac, and Sarah sends Hagar and Ishmael away. So first, Sarah was not present at the birth of Ishmael. And now she sends Ishmael away, which you should not do according to those tablets, right? So for me personally, the concern is not whether or not she had this idea of bringing Hagar to try and get past this roadblock of barrenness. The issue isn't bringing a third person into the marital unit. The issue for me is her inability to resolve her tension with Hagar and the child and sending that child away. Because we know the rift between Ishmael and Isaac is still very present today, right? That's the tension we experience. And one of the takeaways I want you to take with you tonight is that just because two people have tension and one person leaves or one person passes away does not mean the tension disappears. We still experience this tension very present on a geopolitical landscape, right? So for me, the big challenge of the family isn't the idea of having a surrogate, isn't bringing this third person to the marital unit, it's that they had a lot of difficulty trying to resolve conflict, and the solution was kick the other person out. And kicking someone out does not mean the tension disappears, right? All right. There's big tension right here between this side of the family and this side of the family. Genesis 22, there's the binding of Isaac, and finally the narrator says, okay, hold on a second, folks. Let me give you a long list of other family members because I want to make sure, I'll see your hand, I want to make sure we introduce you to this person named Rebecca. She's going to be the new matriarch in the family. So there's a person named Rebecca. Now let's get back to the story. There's a hand over here.
So what happened to Lot on that previous graph, because he's off of it now?
Yeah, I moved him off so we could focus on Ishmael and Isaac. He's still here. He's still adopted. I just didn't put him here because Bryan was trying to characterize the two sides of the family. So Lot is still present. He stays adopted, right. He partnered with someone else, right. He has some children. But I'm trying to focus on the conflict between Ishmael and Isaac. But he's still part of that family. But obviously he's not as present because he's older. He has his own family. Sodom and Gomorrah. Good question. Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. So here's we are, and you'll notice, where's Lot? Well, I just moved him off to the side because I want to be able to focus on the rest of this. So the narrator basically says there's all these other people and Rebecca. We want to know who Rebecca is because this is going to be a major player in the story because in Genesis 23, Sarah dies, age 127. So she was alive for 27 years after having Isaac, the son of promise. And what's interesting is what happens in the layout of this story, the way the narrator lays it out for us. So Genesis 22, Abraham returns to his young men, and they arose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived in Beersheba. So where does Abraham live? Beersheba, good. Then the narrator talks about this Rebecca back at the ranch. There's a person named Rebecca, and let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. Genesis 23, Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. Sarah died in Kiriath Arba. That is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. So where did Sarah die? Hebron. And Abraham came in, or can be translated, came up to mourn for Sarah and weep for her. So, stay with me for a second. I don't know exactly what's happening here. And one possible explanation is the narrator knows that this family moves around, right? They're moving their flocks around. The narrator is not always telling us where people are or not when they move. We don't have time for that in the story, right? And so maybe they were together at Beersheba, then they moved up in Kiriath Arba to Hebron, and maybe she passed away there. The other possibility is the narrator is trying to show some of the distance between them. Not that they were necessarily divorced, I don't think that happened, but the geographical distance between them might be representative of the emotional distance. Let's think about what Sarah's been through. She moved from the cosmopolitan city of Ur to the wild, wild west of Canaan. Twice, her husband said, hey, will you please participate in the harem of the leader so that I will be okay? Will you take one for the team? Twice she did that, right? Right? Then this whole idea of having this maidservant be a surrogate, and that backfired. And so she's in this situation where she might be jealous of Hagar, and she might feel like she's not the preferred one, because we know later on in the story, there's some conflict between Rachel and Leah when it comes to infertility wars. So we're experiencing a little bit of that right away. There's no mention in the story of Abraham telling Sarah, hey, by the way, the son of promise, I'm going to take him up to the mountain to be sacrificed. There's no mention of that. In fact, Sarah never speaks another word after this binding of Isaac. So it's not too far of a stretch for me to think of there might be possibly some tension in this relationship based on the way she was treated. In this story, in Genesis 23, Abraham always refers to her as my dead. Only the narrator calls Sarah Abraham's wife. So here's the distance between Beersheba and Hebron, 26.4 miles. Well, what does this look like? Looks like this. Here's Beersheba in Hebron, and then here is Bremerton SDA Church in central Tacoma. So there's quite a bit of distance between them. Why would it be that one person lives up here, the other person passes away down here? I think there's a big question mark there. I don't know what it means, but I just want to point out there's some geographical distance between these two locations. Genesis 24, this is where Abraham calls his trusted servant and said, please, we need to find an appropriate wife for Isaac. I need some help. Can you please go on this quest? And so he goes to the well, he sees Rebekah, there's this message, there's this moment, there's this decision opportunity, and then the servant brings Rebekah back to camp, and Isaac brought her, that's Rebekah, into his mother Sarah's tent, and so he's living in his mother's tent right now, which I think is interesting. And he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her, thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So this happened recently, or he's still grieving the passing of his mother. Genesis 25, Abraham, he has more offspring, and to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them away from his son Isaac. He sends all these other sons east. He does not want these other sons around Isaac. And Isaac is an interesting character because Isaac really only has one chapter to shine. Abraham has several chapters, Jacob has several chapters, but Isaac doesn't have that many chapters to shine. In fact, before his only chapter, which is really about him, which is 26, he's upstaged by his twins in chapter 25. Isaac never travels away from Canaan. The other patriarchs do. He seems almost like a supporting character. So, question, does this mean that Isaac is weak? Is he passive? Is he milquetoast? This is hard because whoever you stand next to in your family changes the way that people see you. Whoever you're standing next to changes the way that people see you, how they compare you. Let's look at these three individuals. This is Mark Wahlberg, Anthony Mackie, this is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Look at those shoulders. They know the inside of a weight room. If they were walking towards me on a street, I would pass to the other side to not get in their way. Look how big they look. But when you put these characters who look big next to even bigger characters, here's Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal. This guy, Marky, looks like he came to get some lunch money from his dad. And Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson looks like he just got home from basketball practice. Look how small they look next to these really big men, right? They look like little pipsqueaks. This is DK Metcalf, wide receiver of the Seattle Seahawks. He's like 6'4", 230, like 6% fat, 1,000% muscle. Big boy, right? Big boy. But look how small he looks next to Dikembe Mutombo, used to be in the NBA. He looks like he came to ask his dad for the keys so he could borrow his car. Who you stand next to changes the way people see you. So when you have Big Daddy Abraham, and you have Jacob, who becomes Israel, sandwiched in the middle is Isaac. Does it mean that Isaac wasn't important? No. It's just he was sandwiched between these two giants. And when you're sandwiched between two giants, sometimes you get lost in the shuffle, almost like the middle child. Here are some things about Isaac we may not always remember. Genesis 26, Isaac uses his same father's lie to the new king Abimelech, saying to Rebekah, hey, will you please pretend that you're my sister, not my wife? So he borrows the same lie. He digs wells repeatedly, but he's mistreated. After his father passed away, the city folk end up trying to take the wells away from him several different times. He also grows wheat, so it's clear that he's actually able to span the city folk, growing the wheat, and the nomadic lifestyle, digging wells. So Isaac is a flexitarian when it comes to that. He's able to do both of those things. Genesis 25, so the previous chapter, we know that Ishmael passed away and he lives in defiance of all of his relatives. He lives in defiance of all of his relatives. Genesis 25, there's infertility again, and Isaac is the only patriarch who is said to pray to God. Other patriarchs talk with God, but Isaac prays to God on behalf of his wife's infertility. I think that's interesting. The only patriarch to pray on behalf of his wife's infertility. So Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord heard his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. That's pretty amazing. It wasn't that clear or clean cut for Abraham, right? And it was really messy for Jacob's family, but for Isaac, God responded to him differently. But the children inside her, that's Rebekah, struggled with each other. And she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So Rebekah went to inquire of the Lord, and he declared to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people from within you will be separated. 1 people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." If you want to get your smartphones, there's going to be a QR code up here, a picture or a little video of 2 babies fighting in utero. This could be a very scary experience. For a mother who's trying to have children, she was also experiencing infertility. Now she finally gets pregnant, but these 2 children are jostling. What happens if the umbilical cord gets wrapped around the other person? Very dangerous, precarious situation. So she is obviously, and makes sense, concerned about their well-being and maybe even her own well-being. Here we are, checking in our genogram. Here's some twins, Esau and Jacob. Here's the breakfast Rebekah prepared for her sons. Here's Jacob. Nice milk, a sweet bear sandwich, some cut veggies and fruit, and the leftovers for Esau, right? It's very clear that Rebekah has some preferences, right? Rebekah has some preferences when it comes to her sons. Genesis 25. When the time came for her to give birth, there were indeed twins within her womb. The first one came out red, that's Esau, covered with hair like a fur coat. Sweet introduction into the world. They named him Esau. After this, his brother came out grasping Esau's heel. He was named Jacob, and Isaac was 60 years old when the twins were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. Because Isaac had a taste for wild game, he loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So now the stage is set. Each parent has their favorite child. You know who else was a good hunter? Ishmael. I wonder if there's something happening here where Isaac, who it was not his choice to be separated from his brother, it was his mother's choice. I wonder if there's a piece of this that, Esau is a skilled hunter. My brother who I'm separated from was also a skilled hunter. I wonder if there's a chance that played into his affection for his eldest son. I don't know. Possibility. Genesis 25, this is when Jacob swindles his brother Esau out of his birthright. "Swear to me first," Jacob said. So Esau swore to Jacob and sold him the birthright. If you remember the story, Esau comes home famished, so hungry, drooling for food. And Jacob says, I want your birthright first. Then Jacob gave him some bread and lentil stew to Esau, who ate that and drank and got up and went away. Thus Esau despised his birthright. And we often use this to show that Esau is this ogre of a man, me hunt, me want food. But I think this is actually more of a critique on Jacob than Esau. Here's why. Back then, you didn't have Airbnbs or Taco Bells whenever you traveled. You had to rely on the hospitality of traders or other families, right? I guarantee you, Jacob did not charge other family members this same exorbitant price. Back then, we didn't have cup of noodles. We made big pans of lasagna for everybody. So Jacob pulls out this big pan of lasagna and this garlic bread, says, "Oh, you want a little piece of this lasagna? Give me your birthright first." So either Esau comes in and everybody's eating, but only Jacob charges him this exorbitant amount, or the food has just come out and people are about to eat, or these are the leftovers. And Jacob is charging his brother for leftovers. Whatever the case, this is not a fair exchange. Am I right? He's taking advantage of someone who is famished, and we all know if we don't have enough food or nutrients, we're not going to be able to perform as well when it comes to cognitive thoughts. And maybe there's a chance Esau didn't even care that much. He's the man of the field. He wants to hunt. He doesn't want to stick around in little tents. He's the eldest brother technically by a few minutes, but he might not even want that responsibility. So what is Esau actually giving up? His birthright. But what does that mean? On the left-hand side, we have a situation where there are 10 sons. The firstborn son will get his birthright, then the rest of the remaining inheritance will be split up amongst the 10 children, so he gets his birthright first, Then he gets his piece of the pie, and everything else is split up amongst the remaining siblings. On the right-hand side, when there are only 2 siblings, Esau gets his birthright, which is a third of the pie, and then he gets his piece that belongs to him, and then Jacob gets whatever's left. So basically what's happening is Jacob is saying, look, I want 2/3 of wealthy dad's inheritance, and you will take my 1/3. We'll exchange this, so you get my 1/3 and a bowl of lentil stew, and I'll get your 2/3. We know back then and nowadays, things can get spicy around inheritance, right? Sometimes the worst parts of ourselves come out in families when it comes to disputes around inheritance, right? This is happening here in this family. But Jacob's trying to do this before his father even passed away. He's trying to get the upper hand here. Genesis 27. Jacob deceives his father Isaac. Isaac sends out Ishmael to go hunt some game, bring it back to him so he can bless him. Rebekah hears about it, says, hey, Jacob, I got the sweet idea. Will you go please dress yourself up like your brother, go in and trick your father to get the blessing? Because if I can get you to have the birthright and the blessing, for all intents and purposes, Jacob will be the firstborn of the family. And he wants that. So he's forcing this to happen. And there are major consequences for this family, because after Esau comes home, finds out what's happening, he swears he's going to kill his brother, and then his mother sends him off, and Jacob never sees his favored mother ever again because of this deceit in this family. Because the blessing that was going to be given from Isaac to Esau, but then given to Jacob instead, this includes this idea of fertility, wanting your family to grow to be blessed by God. Here we are. Here's what's happening in the genogram right now. We have Ishmael has a daughter that was actually Esau married as his third wife right over here. Rebekah and Laban, they're siblings, and there's the twin here. Here's Esau, here's Jacob. Jacob comes over here to live with Laban, and then he's supposed to return home. We know that does not happen immediately, but the plan is for him to go for a little bit, then come back home, but he never sees his mother ever again. His mother passes away while he's over with her brother. So Jacob runs up north to find a wife. He sleeps on a stone. I think there are better options, but he gets to choose. Jacob says, I love you, Rachel, to his new wife. Thanks, I'm Leah, by the way, because he gets tricked, right? He has this plan. He has this agreement, handshake, pinky swear with Laban. Hey, I'll work for 7 years so I can marry Rachel, because I desire Rachel. But we know that Laban has other plans, correct? So, and kind of what Laban says is, well, that's not how we do things in our country. That's not how we do things in our family. So Jacob works 7 years for Rachel, marries Leah, complains about it. Laban says, oh, this is just how we do things. Please let her have her 7-day bridal week. Then I will let you marry Rachel. So then he marries Rachel. But then you have to work 7 more years for Rachel, right? So he works 7 more years for Rachel. So how many years did he work for Rachel? 14. How many years did he work for Leah? None. She knows that, right? That is painfully clear. Painfully clear. There's a lot of lying in this family, and they seem to pull from the same script. Abraham lies to Pharaoh, saying, this is my sibling, though she's my wife, and I'm not going to tell you that. Why? To save his own skin. Later to King Abimelech, he says, same thing, this is my sibling. Why? To save his own skin. If it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. Isaac also lies to the next king Abimelech, says, oh, me too, this is my sibling, Rebekah. Why? To save his own skin. Then what gets interesting is Jacob, prompted by Rebekah, lies to Isaac, saying, I am my sibling, and here is his skin. And then Leah, prompted by Laban, lies to Jacob, saying, me too, I am my sibling. I'm Rachel, I'm marrying you, and here is her skin. So people are really interested in who the sibling is. That seems to play a prominent role in the way they are being deceitful. But God still blessed tender-eyed Leah. In fact, when you look at the first 3 sons and the meaning of their names, Leah is talking about her pain she's experiencing in her marriage. And finally, when we get to Judah, she transitions and she says, this time I'll praise the Lord. But she has several children, and the first 3 are about the pain she's experiencing in her marriage, the emotional distance from her partner. emotional distance from Jacob. This is real pain that Leah is experiencing. Genesis 30, there are infertility wars. There are mandrakes, and Jacob ends up prospering. Now, in the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben, who's the eldest son of Leah, went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But Leah said to her, "Is it a small matter for you to take my husband? And would you take my son's mandrakes also?" So Rachel said, "Therefore, he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." What's a mandrake? Yeah, it's a good question. That's why I'm asking it. Anyone know what a mandrake is? Oh, I came prepared. So, you know what a mandrake is? Oh, waiting for someone? Okay, I'm going to click this button and we'll find out what a mandrake is. Deal? These are mandrakes. See the fruit and the flower up here? But I want you to focus on what's going on with the roots. See how the roots are very anthropomorphic? They could look very human-like. Do we see that? In ancient times, when you pull up a mandrake and you see this little character coming out of the ground, it doesn't take too much of a stretch to understand why people would take these mandrakes and they would wear them as amulets to ward away evil spirits or give them luck and prosperity when it comes to infertility. You could also shave these down and put them in hot water to make a tea as an aphrodisiac. So mandrakes, what's basically happening is Reuben goes out in the field, finds some mandrakes, some fertility field drugs, brings them back home to help his mom get pregnant again. Rachel, who is still barren, says, "I want some of those fertility drugs, give them to me." Leah says, you took my husband from me. Rachel says, "Okay, I'll let you have the husband for one night, but I want those drugs." So there's this back and forth between them. Is anyone a physician or work in pharmacy? No one here? Yes, is there a hand back? Would you please tell us what delirium hallucinogenic tropium alkaloids are? No? Okay. Should we send the microphone back there? No, okay. Come on, okay. So these are drugs, right? That's what the mandrakes are. Is this getting a nod of your head? Okay. So what's happening is Rachel is pimping out her husband for one night to get drugs. That's what's happening. That's what's happening in this family. I'm using some strong words, but that's actually what's happening in this transaction, right? You can sleep with my husband, but I want those drugs. This is the level of transaction that's happening in this family currently. There's a lot of unresolved tension. There's a Pashto proverb, "I was swift in my revenge, I only waited 100 years. So Jacob will end up returning back to Canaan with his wives. And the question is, how is Esau going to receive him, right? They left on not so good terms. In fact, Esau was going to kill him, right? How is this return going to show up? Genesis 31-34. Jacob decides to run with his family to Canaan, taking the teraphim, the family idols of Laban. So these family idols represent a few different things, but the main thing is it represents who is entitled to the inheritance. So Jacob is taking the document for inheritance with him as he's running away from Laban, and he checks it with his wives. And his wives both say, "That's fine with us. We won't inherit any of our father's wealth anyways. He has reduced our rights to those of foreign women, and after he sold us, he wasted the money you paid him for us." So he did not preserve any of those resources for his daughters. His daughters are saying, "Great, let's get out of here." Yes?
I thought it was Rachel that took the idols.
Yes. So we're going to get to that. Yes. So they're chased by Laban, right? And Laban runs after them and says, "Whoa, whoa, 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 hold the phone. Where are my idols?" And everybody says, "I didn't take them. I didn't take them. I didn't take them." And Jacob swears up and down that he didn't take them. The trickster swears up and down that he didn't take them. And Laban looks around for them, and we find that Rachel is inside of a tent on a camel saddle and says, "You can't come in here, Dad, because it's my time of the month." So Laban says, "Okay, I'll just move on." But in those saddlebags are hidden the idols. So what's interesting to me is this is not the first time in the Bible. Well, this is the first time, but not the last time in the Bible. Someone swears up and down that something isn't true. We know later on that Peter swears up and down that he does not know the Nazarene, but he clearly does, right? So it does not surprise me that later on in the story, a few chapters later, they end up burying the idols, and there's no mention of, whoa, where'd these idols come from? So it wouldn't surprise me if Jacob and Rachel are in cahoots to take these. In fact, Laban still doesn't trust them and says, okay, I'll let you go, but I want you to put up this boundary stone, this Mizpah. Do not cross this stone. The reason for this is, after Laban passes away, if the family takes these teraphim, these family idols, back over to Padamaran, they can say, see, we own these idols. We are entitled to your inheritance. So he's saying, put up this line and promise me you will never cross this line. Because he still, even though he couldn't find the idols, he does not trust them. Genesis 26, Jacob is afraid of Esau's 400 people, wrestles with God. Now it's Israel, so Jacob is renamed Israel, reunites with Esau, and there are echoes of Luke 15. If you're ever interested in doing a little comparison, look at the story of Genesis 33 and Luke 15. There are some interesting parallels here. Genesis 34, Dinah, Leah and Jacob's daughter, was sexually assaulted. Levi and Simeon get revenge on Shechem. Jacob is very passive, but also very upset about this. In fact, verse 30, Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, you have brought trouble upon me by making me a stench to the Canaanites and the Perizzites, the people of this land. We are few in number, and if they unite against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed. But Simeon and Levi replied, should they have treated our sister like a prostitute? So the big question here is, who is Jacob for? Is he for himself and his own well-being, preservation, or is he more interested in protecting his family? Right now, he's interested in his own skin. What's interesting is Israel gets renamed Israel a second time. It's almost like God is saying, look, I renamed you Israel. Remember, you're Israel now, right? You're in charge of your family, but he's not sticking up very well when it comes to his family. Genesis 25, Jacob takes and buries the family idols. No surprise about where they came from, as if he knew all along. Rachel dies as Benjamin is born. Reuben sleeps with Bilhah, which is the maidservant of Rachel. And this is really a slap in his father's face, saying, I'm going to do this, and you can't stop me, because you are not the real leader of this family. If you were, you would not make this happen. You would stop this. But Jacob/Israel does not do a thing about it. Jacob is renamed Israel. He wrestled contended with God again. Can't you handle your family? Jacob sees his father Isaac again, but no Rebekah, right? Because Rebekah passed away. Genesis 36, Esau has some descendants, the Edomites. Genesis 37, we're getting closer to the end. We have Joseph, who has dreams, and brothers who scheme. So we have Zilpah, Gad and Asher, biological mother of Gad and Asher and Jacob. Leah has 6 sons. Here's Dinah. Joseph and Benjamin, the biological sons of Jacob and Rachel. And then Dan and Naphtali, the biological sons of Jacob and Bilhah. So here we're building out our family genogram. Joseph to his brothers. Joseph gets some special treatment, right? He's treated differently than his brothers, and we know this, right? He has a pretty cush position in his family, right? Joseph is very different from his brothers in several ways. In fact, Genesis 34:7, and his brothers saw that their father loved him, that's Joseph, more than all of his brothers, sounds like combined, and so they hated him and could not speak to him on friendly terms. If they were sitting together at Thanksgiving table, they would not ask him to pass the salt or the mashed potatoes. They'd ask anybody else. They could not even speak to him. There's a lot of tension in this family, no? Right? But there is tension in the parents, right? And there's tension in the previous generation. There's been a lot of tension. It's just been passed down from generation to generation like a precious family heirloom. And other brothers are sitting in it. We know that Joseph is a tattletale. Let's be honest. I know that sometimes we whitewash him to make this pure, holy individual, but he could be hard to get along. He's a tattletale. He tells on his brother, he snitches on his brothers. You don't do that. He brought a bad report of them to his father. That's one reason why they don't like him. He's clearly Israel's favorite. We know that Jacob loved Joseph. He's the firstborn of Israel's favorite wife. Jacob loved Rachel and not Leah. He's gifted a coat of many colors or a royal coat. He's dressed differently than his brothers. He's not assigned the same labor responsibilities. You remember the story? Israel is home with Joseph and saying, hey, you're chilling out here at the tent watching Netflix. I might as well get you out, get some exercise. Go find your brothers who are doing all the hard work, right? He has different labor responsibilities. He has dreams of his family and brothers bowing down to him, and he has the audacity to share it twice. He would be a hard brother to get along with, right? The brothers could have told Joseph to stop saying he's better than them. Say, don't tell me any more dream stories. They could have just stolen his coat. They could have just told their father that his favoritism hurt them. Instead, they decided to take Joseph, rip off his coat, tear it to pieces, put blood on it, sell him into slavery, bring the bloodied coat back to their father, and then his father tears his clothes in grief. That's how they decide to handle this. Even animals are not safe when this family wants something for themselves. In the previous generation, we know that another animal was killed so that we could put some hairy skin on Jacob, right? Sometimes animals are caught in the crossfire. Genesis 38, we have this Judah and Tamar interlude, which we're not going to get into. We know that Joseph prospers in Egypt, then he's imprisoned. Genesis 40, the dreamer becomes the interpreter. Joseph becomes the viceroy of Egypt and stores food, which is good news, right? Because there's a famine coming. So he's storing food in preparation for this large famine that's coming down the pike. Genesis 42 through 45, there's more prejudice and discrimination because there's a famine in the land, and Israel is in Canaan, doesn't have enough food. So he sends his sons down to Egypt to get some food, right? Oh, here's the sweet part of the story, getting some tingles, thinking about this brother, who's the most powerful man in Egypt other than Pharaoh, who's receiving and recognizes his brothers, but the brothers do not recognize him. Oh, this is family drama. I love it. And he seems to have prescient knowledge, and he's asked very curious questions about their family and the youngest brother who's not attending with them. And he says, I think you're all spies. And he imprisons all of his brothers. And they say, we're not spies, we're just buying food. And he says, okay, I'll keep Simeon hostage, and you can take the food and go back up. And as they're going back up with the food, they look in their sacks, and behold, the money is back in the sacks, as if they didn't pay for the food. So now they either spies or thieves, right? They bring the food back up, but it's a long famine. The ground still isn't producing. They're experiencing the pains of hunger. So they say, Dad, we got to go back down, but we have to bring Benjamin. The father does not want to lose his last son from his favorite wife. He's worried about that happening. So eventually the brothers vouch for Benjamin's safety. They go back down with Benjamin, and they come back with Benjamin. Joseph sits them in birth order. Man, how does Joseph know this? He must have this special divine knowledge. He sits them in birth order and gives Benjamin, the youngest, 5 times the amount of food. They are amazed by this and perplexed. How does he know this? He sends them away with food, but he puts a cup used for a divination in the sacks as they go. So as they're heading across the desert back to Canaan, Joseph sends his servant run after them, stop them, and accuse them of stealing the divination cup, right? And stops them. All the brothers say, we didn't steal any cup. We don't know what you're talking about. You can look in all of our packs. Another theme, we've heard this before. You can look everywhere you want to. We didn't take it. The servant checks in all the sacks, and lo and behold, gets to Benjamin's sack, opens it up, pulls out the divination cup, and all the brothers tear their clothes. Why is Joseph doing this? Why is Joseph going through all this rigmarole and treating his brothers this way, trying to lie to them, put stuff in their sacks? Why is he doing all this? I think he's testing the family system. I think he's testing to see how they are treating each other and how they treat Benjamin. Why? Let's pretend the brothers were in the same family situation they were when they got rid of Joseph. They go down to Egypt with Benjamin. On the way back, they're stopped, and some representatives from Egypt come and say, we got to look in your sacks, and lo and behold, Benjamin has stolen this divination cup. The brothers could have said, oh man, sorry, Benji, we can't do anything about it. Guess you got to go back down to Egypt. And they go back to their father and say, Dad, we're so sorry. But Benjamin has some sticky fingers. He brought this upon himself. A sweet alibi to get rid of the youngest brother, no? But instead, they tear their clothes in protest, in grief. And we've been waiting 7 chapters for this to happen. Because back in chapter 37, they tore Joseph's coat, and then Father Israel tore his coat in response. But the brothers have never torn their clothes. Now the idea of losing Benjamin, another brother from their family, they tear their clothes in protest, in grief at this idea. You are not taking our brother. We are all going down to Egypt. So Joseph is testing what's happening in the family waters right now. Because he doesn't know. He's in Egypt, right? He's wanting to know, do we all get along? Or there's still this resentment and this conflict and this tension in this family? Woo! Okay, that was a little bit. Let me take a little break, drink of water. We're going to try and answer these questions. What are some of Abraham's family rules? What are the intergenerational patterns of behavior? What are the patterns that are repeated in each generation? How do people handle anxiety and tension? Who are the villains? Who are the heroes? And we're going to use a genogram to help us answer some of these questions. Here we go. So here's our genogram right here. Pre-relational lines. Now, something else you can do with the genogram, you can show lots of other things. You can show what kind of work someone has, or if they have some sort of chronic illness, or if they use substances. So I'm going to take some liberty to show some characteristics that we learn about certain family members having. So, defiance. In each generation, there are characters who have defiance. Hagar is defiant, Ishmael is defiant, Esau is defiant, Gad and Asher and the 6 sons of Leah, they are all defiant. Okay? Here are the liars in the family. The purple. Abram, Sarai, Isaac, Rebekah, Laban, Jacob, Rachel, the sons down here. A lot of liars in the family. In every generation, there's some people who are a little bit deceitful, right? Every generation, there's conflict within the marital unit and conflict amongst the siblings in every generation. In every generation, there is favoritism towards the youngest offspring. In every generation, there's favoritism towards the youngest offspring. There's also prejudice and discrimination against other people groups or people who are not fully accepted as part of your family. In every generation, there's extreme manipulation happening, trying to coerce someone to doing something that we know is not good. This happens in every single generation in this family. In every generation, there's adoption. Lot is adopted. In some ways, Benjamin is adopted because his mother passes away. The rest of the family has to take care of them. Later on, we'll find out in a few slides, Ephraim and Manasseh are adopted. And you can even go back to Abraham. In some ways, God adopted Abraham and said, look, I'm going to take care of you as your father and give you land and a family. In every generation, there's some cutoff. Someone runs away or is kicked out. Hagar runs away from Sarah. God sends her back. Sarah kicks out Hagar and Ishmael a second time. We know that Jacob runs away from Esau. Then he runs away from Laban, right? We know that Joseph is kicked out and sold to some extended family members traveling to Egypt as a slave. So how does a family resolve conflict? We kick people out. That's how we deal with conflict. I wonder if Abram was running from something, and if there's anything he was running from, I'm guessing it was infertility, trying to find a solution to this. And if God promises this, it makes sense why he'd be interested in experiencing this. There's this unrepaired rift between Ishmael and Isaac that we still experience the reverberations today, millennia later. So, who are the villains? Who are the heroes? Anyone know? Well, let's get the microphone out. I want to hear some of the answers.
They're all villains.
They're all villains. Okay, what does that mean? Well, there's some good, sweet stuff. I want people online to be able to hear this.
I mean, we're all responsible for our own choices.
What do you mean?
Meaning, like, they all play the part in the confliction and the tension, and we have to look more into it within ourselves. That's where the tension starts.
Yeah.
And then we affect each other in the family unintentionally.
Did you say we affect each other or we infect each other with the tension?
Both.
Both? I like the infect. I like both. But we infect each other with this tension, and this tension and the patterns that keep this tension alive are passed down from generation to generation like a precious family heirloom. Right. Who else is a villain? Any specific characters? Laban. Okay, Laban's a villain. Okay. Anyone else? Huh? Hagar's a villain? Why is Hagar a villain?
Just in the way that I've heard sermons in the past, like Hagar is the third party. She's the villain. She kind of breaks the beautiful marital bliss between Abraham and Sarah.
Yes. Oh, do we see how she is actually the victim of what's happening? This is forced upon her. She doesn't really get that much of a choice. But she's the bad person. She's the one who interrupted this beautiful family. But this was not her choice, right? she felt mistreated, so she ran away to try and preserve herself and her baby. God tells her to go back. She's mistreated again, and she is pushed off, and her baby is not accepted as part of this family, according to Sarah. Yeah, good. So she's the villain, but what did she do bad? In fact, oftentimes, let's go back to, oh, maybe it's right here. Esau is seen as this lumbering lummox, but I mean, what he did is not half or a tenth of what Jacob did when it comes to deceitfulness, right? Esau didn't do that. He just wants to go shoot rabbits. He's a happy soul. That's all he wants to do. Hagar, Ishmael, he lives in defiance of all his relatives. Yeah, but he's kicked out, right? He's kicked out to go die in the desert. He has to be a survivor, right? How about these sons of Leah? They're often seen as the bad guys, right? How could you take your blood brother, put him down into a dry well, and then sell him into slavery? That's terrible. But in some ways, these brothers are just doing what's been taught to them through multiple generations. They lied about it. They took advantage of the situation. They turned a profit. So in some ways, these brothers are actually following the rules of the family, right? In Abraham's family mafia. They're following these rules. We see them as bad, but every behavior is a symptom of the system. And we see clearly in these generations, in this family, what the family rules are. So in some ways, these brothers that sold off Joseph, bad thing to do, they're following the family rules, right? They're kicking someone out, taking advantage of the situation. Is it good? No, but they're following the family rules. Yes, hand over here. Let's get the microphone over here.
So what happened in the 20 years or whatever of Joseph's brothers that they really changed and didn't treat Benjamin the same way? They broke tradition.
I love that question. And I don't know the answer. I have some ideas, but you're going to have to stick around because tomorrow afternoon I'll spend some time talking about that. Yeah, something has changed clearly, right? So at one point in time, they kicked a brother out. But later on, they showed solidarity with their brother, right? So something has changed in that family. Going some tingles. Something has changed in that family system. And I want to know why. Maybe, well, some ideas tomorrow. Yes?
Reuben is the one that didn't want to leave him in that pit like that, so there was one of them that had a conscience.
At least one of them had a conscience, but then he walked away and left his brothers, and they said, well, Reuben's gone, now we're going to take advantage of the situation, turn a profit, get rid of him. And Reuben came back, oh no, what happened? What happened? You shouldn't have done this, guys. Guys, you shouldn't have done this. Well, if he had some responsibility, if he was really worried about his brothers, Joseph's well-being, he could have stuck around. He could have stuck around. Yes?
Well, I think it's possible that Jacob learned his lesson by the way he treated Joseph, spoiling him rotten probably, and causing him to be hated by his brothers, maybe unintentionally, and maybe he realized he shouldn't be doing that with Benjamin. So maybe he wanted Benjamin to be more loved by his brothers instead of hated.
Yeah, I mean, if that's a possibility, then he finally learned his lesson. Oh, that's right, I have been treating Joseph differently, huh? Maybe I should adjust the way I'm parenting. We can't, as parents, we cannot treat all of our children the exact same, but we should be aware of how we're treating them and how that affects their relationship. Okay, in every generation of this family, there's conflict in the marital unit. In every generation, the younger son receives the blessing. In every generation, there's conflict between siblings, and the main family rule that I pull out is do whatever is expedient. What can I do right now to help me right now? In every generation, this helps me. Oh, I'm worried about my well-being. Can you please pretend you're my sister? Well, I'm barren. Let's get a child. Oh, now I don't want it. I'm going to kick it out. Whatever is expedient for the moment, not always thinking about long-term consequences. Whatever we refuse to acknowledge, we will undoubtedly and unconsciously pass on to others. This is why a genogram is so helpful. If we can understand our own family system, every behavior is a symptom of the system. If we can understand that we are patterned creatures that have patterned behavior, we can recognize, oh, what I'm doing that's hurting me and other people, this is a part of a pattern that I learned in my family of origin. If we're not aware of that, if we do not increase our awareness of our own pattern behavior, guess what? We're going to continue doing it. We're going to continue passing down this unresolved tension and the behavior patterns that keep that tension caught in the family. Let's talk about life satisfaction. The narrator makes it very clear there's a shift in life satisfaction when it comes to these three patriarchs. Genesis 25:7. These are all the years of Abraham's life that he lived, 175 years. Abraham breathed his last and died at a good old age, an old man and satisfied with life. Let's go to Isaac. Genesis 35. Now the days of Isaac were 180 years, 5 years longer. Then Isaac breathed his last and died and was gathered to his people. An old man of ripe age. What's missing? Satisfied with life. Good. Let's go to Israel. Israel is talking to Pharaoh here. Pharaoh's asking some questions. And Jacob says, the years of my living abroad are 130. Few and unpleasant have been the years of my life. There's been a shift in each generation when it comes to life satisfaction. And this is what happens when we have unresolved tension and we pass that down to the next generation. There can be an accumulation of tension that's passed down from generation to generation. So we inherit tension and stress and anxiety, and we also create new tension, stress, and anxiety. And that big ball can be passed down to the next generation, and this affects our own well-being. We see it clearly here in the scriptures. Too many people spend their lives being dutiful descendants instead of good ancestors. The responsibility of each generation is not to please their predecessors, it's to improve things for their offspring. It's more important to make your children proud than your parents proud. Genesis 48. What's happening here, this is the end of Jacob's life. And he's so thrilled to finally meet up with Joseph again, and he's on his deathbed. And Joseph is told, behold, your son Joseph has come to you. Israel collected his strength and sat up in bed. Then Jacob said to Joseph, God Almighty appeared to me at Luz in the land of Canaan and blessed me. And he said to me, behold, I will make you fruitful and numerous, and I'll make you a multitude of peoples, and will give this land to your descendants. Hear the echoes again, a family and land, right? He's making sure that Joseph understands this. After you as an everlasting possession. Now your two sons, he's talking to Joseph, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to see you again, so I thought you were dead. These two sons that were yours are mine. Ephraim and Manasseh shall be mine, as Reuben and Simeon are. I'm adopting them. Those two are my sons. But your children that you have fathered after them shall be yours. They shall be called in the names of the brothers of their inheritance. And then he goes off on this interesting tangent talking about Rachel. Now as for me, when I came from Paddan, Rachel died to my sorrow in the land of Canaan on the journey, when there was still some distance to go to Ephrath. I buried her there on the way to Ephrath, that is Bethlehem. What's happening here? Why is he talking about his favorite wife that's passed? Why is he bringing this up? I think it's interesting thinking about the sequence of events. I never thought I would see you again, Joseph. I'm adopting your two sons as mine, just like Reuben and Simeon are mine. And now I'm thinking about my wife. I'm wondering, I don't know. This is Bryan just thinking out loud. Tongue is wagging. I'm wondering if Israel is thinking, Rachel passed away in childbirth. Never got to really spend time with her new son. I know there's been conflict between Leah and Rachel. I'm adopting these two sons because they are in the line of Rachel, and now they are my sons, just like my other sons are, so now Rachel has 4 sons. Benjamin, Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh. I wonder if that's what's happening. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see your face, and behold, God has let me see your children as well, and I've adopted them, they are my sons. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim with his right hand. Now the narrator spends a long time making sure we know exactly what's happening in the scene. We have the eldest on the right-hand side eldest on the left-hand side of Israel, and the youngest on the right-hand side. Puts them very clear because he's expecting his father to bless them. He's expecting his father to put out his hands to bless the sons. But instead, Israel crosses his hands as if he's going to bless the wrong sons. And Joseph gets upset. He does not like this. Joseph saw his father place his right hand on Ephraim's head. It displeased him, and he grabbed his father's hand and moved. Don't do this, Dad, you're doing it wrong. Takes his father's hand to move it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's head. And Joseph said to his father, not so, Dad, you're getting it all wrong. For this one's the first one. You're confused. Place your right hand on his head. I made it simple for you. As if this had not already occurred in prior generations. But his father refused and said, I know, my son, I know. He will also become a people, and he will also be great. However, his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his descendants shall become a multitude of nations. Why is he doing this crossing? I don't know. I know that those newsy tablets we talked about earlier give permission for the father to bless the younger son if they want to, right? You're allowed to do that. We know in Israel / Jacob's generation, there was conflict between Esau and Jacob when it came to the blessing, right? In fact, that's what led to the family split. What would have happened had Isaac exercised this right? If Isaac would have told Esau, go get some game for me, and instead of the deception happening, Jacob waits patiently, Esau comes back, cooks the game, and just before Isaac's going to bless Esau, he says, bring in Jacob too. So now he has his two sons. If that had happened, he could have crossed his hands, blessed the youngest son, and the family would have never been split apart. Instead, the deceit happened, the family was split, Jacob was sent away, never saw his mother again, bringing so much grief to the family. And I wonder if Israel, who was the person who did the deceiving, was thinking, wow, if we would have done this, our family would have been different. So, closing theological reflections, and then I'm going to send the microphone out because I want to make sure I hear from your voices as well. Closing theological reflections. 1, God chose to make and remake his covenant with these imperfect people. Would you like to invite this family over for Christmas dinner? Maybe. Maybe it looks a lot like your family, right? There are some things happening here that might have happened in our own family, right? Our family is not perfect, at least mine isn't. And you might see some parallels here. Tension, manipulation, favoritism, maybe even in your own family. People in this family seem to work really hard, even taking advantage of other people to try and obtain and protect God's already promised blessings. Doing a lot of extra work to try and secure that for themselves because they're envious and jealous and they're worried, the scarcity mentality. Yet sometimes they also seem to put that promise in jeopardy. God promised them Canaan, and Jacob's running away to Padamaran, right? But God promised them, but there's all this tent, we got to get away from it. So they're not always thinking about God's promises, right? They think about self-preservation. God works even harder to not let our dysfunction ruin his covenant with us. It's righteousness by faith for a reason. Otherwise, look what's in jeopardy, right? If the covenant was based on our behaviors, not God's sacrifice, look at this family. This is not a sacrosanct family. There's some challenges here, right? And I think there's a contrast between God's fierce covenant loyalty, his hesed towards his people, compared to Abraham's family loyalty. We see how loyal Abraham's family is to itself. There's a contrast between human to human versus divine to human. And sometimes the actions of one person can change a family tree. Joseph was sent away, separated from that family system, and he grew up to be an amazing individual that not only saved his family, but saved families around the region, right? Often, we're not getting out of dysfunctional emotional or behavior patterns until we get clear of toxic systems. Families, organizations, churches, relationships in which we're enmeshed. It's hard to heal when the relational oxygen we're breathing every day is polluted. I'm not saying you should cut yourself off from your family. I just want to recognize Joseph ends up being different from the rest of his family, right? There's a difference between them. In fact, he's interested in saving his family and the surrounding region. Up to that point in time, the family has been interested in preserving themselves. Sometimes their own individual skin over the family. There's a shift in mindset. Jeremiah 31:29. In those days they will not say again, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge. So here's what I want to hear from you. Let's get the roving microphones, please. What stuff did you notice in Abraham's family that I missed? How might this change the way you see Abraham's family, or how might this change the way you see your family or romantic relationship? So what did I miss? How might this change the way you see or experience Abraham's family? How might this change the way you see your own family or your own romantic relationships? And up here.
I was just there.
You were just there, I know.
I don't know if this is pertinent, but you focus so much on infertility. And I just remember doing a study, and it was land and descendants, and you didn't focus much on the land portion of it. So I was just wondering, did the land part of it come into focus, was it as an important?
Good.
Was it as important?
So why do you gloss over the land issue, Brian?
Yeah.
Okay. So probably because I didn't do a good enough job highlighting that. So every generation there was a famine. The famine led Abraham and Sarah down to Egypt, which led Abraham to be worried about his own well-being, so he would lie to preserve his own skin because he was worried about the prejudice he would be experiencing. Same thing happened later on. There was another famine in the land. So he and his wife went up to the Philistines to hopefully get some food from Abimelech. Same thing, worried about his own well-being. This whole famine issue also drove the brothers to go down to Egypt, then back up, then down again with Benjamin because they were trying to deal with what's happening with lack of food. So what's happening with the famine, I get some tingles. The family had to make some choices they would have not normally had to make. But this increased the tension in their lives, and they had to find a way to navigate. How do we get some food? And it put them in some pretty precarious positions. Good. Does that help a little bit? Yeah. Okay, thank you. The hand back there.
So the way I'm looking at it is the way of seeing tension in how sin played out. How do I say this? You see, it's very complex in the sense where the brain hurts as you go through. It's like go through all of the geogram. Somehow God has somewhat have to intervene. Just like when you look at the story of Joseph. He didn't know that he would be so there. Sometimes God has a plan that somehow intervene. And I can also see the breaking of generational curses through this kind of conflict. My question is with people that, I come from an adopted family of 18. And if you didn't bring that about the awareness, and especially coming from Samoa in a faraway land, I would never understand the behaviors and the awareness you bring about. Because you also have to ask the question, how do you solve the tension with not having the awareness? And for people who don't believe in God, and yet we're dealing with it daily and trying to heal from the environment of that. You know what I mean? Makes it really hard sometimes to create relationship, which is the most difficult thing that we're dealing with.
Let me see if I understand you. So,
yeah, go ahead.
What happens if we experience this tension, these behavior patterns, but we don't necessarily have a genogram to look back to? We don't have the information as to how this all started in the first place. Is this correct?
Right. It helps, and it does help, but how do you bring that awareness about to people who comes from foster family and people who don't believe in God and stuff like that? You know what I mean? The awareness is there. I'm just saying it to help break family curses in a sense.
I'll try and answer it briefly, and then we can talk later if you want to. So anytime there's someone who's adopted or a foster child that is adopted into a family, that new family is built on the grave of the previous family, right? Because that previous family was not able to be a safe place for that child. So there's always loss involved with that. And so when you have a child who is taken into a new family, every behavior is a symptom of the system, right? And I know there's some combination between nature and nurture, right? But when you take one person from one system and they move to another system, if that system is healthy, that individual can grow and flourish. If that system is not healthy, then this individual is at the mercy of the rules of the system, right? And they grow up in this situation where they may not be as supported, as loved, as cared for, know that they are nurtured and important and valuable. So they grow up in a very different sort of system. It might be potentially better than the previous system that was clearly unsafe, but it doesn't mean the new system is necessarily that healthy. Does this help a little bit, or get a thumbs up? Okay, I'm getting a thumbs up. Okay, I'm happy to talk more about it afterwards. Good. Any other questions or any other comments? How might this change the way you see Abraham's family, your own family, romantic relationships? What is some stuff that I missed that you noticed you think we should make sure we are all aware of? Yes, there's a hand over here.
I wouldn't say that you missed it, but you didn't mention it, other than...
It's a nice way to say that I missed it, but...
No,
okay.
Other than, they all lied, and they all lied, from generation to generation. But that started in heaven.
Correct.
So that goes back and back. If you look back and you look back and you see all these graphs and everything, it started in heaven, and there is a solution for all of it.
And we know that tension between brothers, that happened previously in Genesis, right? So siblings having conflict. So we can go way back to the beginning of humanity and before then and see this tension that we experience on the cosmic scale brought down to earth, right? The great controversy, the tension between good and evil, between God and Satan, like this is playing out in the family, right? And sometimes, I'll dip my toe in this. Sometimes we see this behavior and we can say, oh, well, Satan did these bad things. But people also have a responsibility, right, for their own behavior, their own actions. It can be really easy to use Satan as a scapegoat. Oh, he's doing bad. We have some responsibilities too, right? We have some choice, right? And yes, I believe Satan is the enemy, but if we are doing all the heavy lifting, Satan doesn't need to lift a finger. If we are engaging in these maladaptive behaviors that hurt ourselves and other people, he can just sit back and watch, right? So we have some responsibility, some personal responsibility to handle this. Good. Any other yes, over here.
I have to think about Abraham's relationship with God, because he came from, we don't really know between Adam and the patriarchs to Abraham how much of that relationship with God and this is how you live a godly life was lost. But we have God calling him out of Ur, and then he's speaking with him and forming a relationship with him. But this wasn't a post-Exodus, I am the God who brought you out of Egypt, here's how you worship me and obey me. He didn't have a manual of here's how to live a godly life. And I've wondered sometimes how that affected the way he treated those around him.
Man, this is such a good question. Love this question. I don't know if we have time to get into all the overlapping nuances of this. That could be its own little seminar. And I don't know if I have all the answers. But we do know that Abraham's faith, his relationship with God, changed over time, right? We know that there was a growth. Yeah, God called him and promised him family and land, and he went on that blind faith, but he also was doing some things that were not very helpful and pretty hurtful to his family, right? He grew in faith, I'm getting some tingles, grew in faith as time went on, and I hope we can take some courage in that if we maintain the course and connect with God, our faith can also grow over time, right? Instead of just this plateau, whatever faith level you're at right now, as you continue to interact with God, the Creator God, the divine, the covenant God, if we interact with him, he will reveal more and more of himself to us, just like he did to Abraham. Because he's interested in us, and we do not scare him away from our bad behavior. Okay, it's 8:27. There's no other hands. I'm happy to stay here afterwards, but I want to go to the next slide or two, and then we can pray. Is that all right? Okay. It will take every triggered nerve, every tremble in your voice, every butterfly in your belly, and every rejoicing ancestor for you to say, no, I'm not doing this anymore. If you understand what sort of pattern you're a part of, you can make a conscious choice to try not engage in that pattern anymore. If you don't know what the pattern is, you're just going to continue it. All human behavior makes sense when put in context. Every behavior is a symptom of the system. And if we can understand the systems that people are part of, like at the very beginning of this presentation, remember Roxy? There was a lot of drama. A lot of that is because she was the product of her system, right? If she was part of a different system, she might be behaving very differently. So don't be too quick to blame the person. Maybe look at the system. And this Abraham story, all this tension behavior patterns that were passed down from generation to generation, they all had a responsibility and opportunity to change that. Just like we all have an opportunity and responsibility to make some changes as well. And the changes we make can have powerful ripple effects. Even if you feel like maybe you don't have children or you have children that have left the nest, just because you're part of a community here at church and your family and extended family, you have opportunities, so many opportunities every day to change your behavior patterns, and in doing so, create ripple effects that reduces tension in the family, reduces stress, stops these maladaptive behavior patterns. You have so many opportunities. But if we can see that every behavior is a symptom of the system, you can also reduce some of the blame you might have for yourself. Why do I keep doing this? Well, it's because I'm part of this system. Oh, it makes sense. I'm a patterned creature. I'm a patterned individual. I just need to try and change my pattern. All right, let's pray. Father God, you are so good and so patient and so different than us. We need you so bad. We need you in our hearts. We need you in our relationships. We need you in our families. You know that we have broken relationships with you, with other people, and we are just trying to do the best we can. But only you are the great counselor. Only you are the wise leader. Only you can make things whole. I pray you give us the courage and the fortitude and the direction and the insight to make changes that reflect who you truly are. You are a good God, and we want to be more like your children. Amen. All right, I'll see you tomorrow morning, and hopefully this afternoon. Sorry, tomorrow afternoon. Not tomorrow morning and tomorrow afternoon.